There's one thing no one teaches you about being a parent. One day you realize your children no longer need your advice, and when that day comes, it doesn't crash in. It's not dramatic. It arrives like a dry wind, soft, but it stings. Maybe you've felt this before. You're sharing something small from your day, and your child cuts you off with a short reply. You gently offer a suggestion, just hoping to make things easier for them. But they brush it off with a glance. You wait all week to call and check in, and the voice on the other end just says, okay, I'm busy. At first you're confused, then sad. And eventually you begin to ask yourself, what did I do wrong? You still remember, don't you? The days when you held them in your arms. You stayed up all night because of a cough. You skipped meals, sleep, even your dreams, just to keep the home running. You were the first person they called when they needed comfort advice or a steady voice. You spent years being their protector. But one day you realize your voice is no longer needed. Your presence no longer matters. And your words of care, your reminders, your concern, have become something people find bothersome. The pain of aging isn't in the body. It's in those quiet moments when you are dismissed by the very people you gave your whole life to. You don't expect much. You just want to be heard, to be respected, to feel that I still matter. But when you speak, your children quickly change the subject. When you ask how they are, they respond half-heartedly. When you need help, everyone is busy. And so you learn to stay quiet. You push your emotions aside, afraid of being a burden. You tell yourself they're grown now. They have their own lives, but deep down, you know you are hurting. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's a long Sunday afternoon when you cook a meal and no one shows up. It's when you tell a story and realize no one was listening from the start. It's when you leave the dinner table and no one notices you've gone. That feeling, it doesn't shout. It's like a deep scratch. One others think is harmless, but you know you've been left behind. Love at this age isn't hugs or gifts. It's a steady gaze, free of judgment. It's a simple thank you, spoken sincerely. It's the kind of listening that says, you still matter to me. You're not asking for obedience. You're not begging for praise. You just want to be seen with dignity because you've never stopped being kind. You've never stopped caring. You're just growing older and being forgotten. Many people say, when you're old, you should be humble, quiet, and know your place. But no one tells you this. Being humble doesn't mean disappearing. Being quiet doesn't mean being disrespected. You have the right to speak. You have the right to say no. You have the right to ask for decency, even if you're 60, 70, or 80, because respect has no age. And if you see yourself in these words, please know this, you are not alone. So many other fathers and mothers have quietly asked themselves, I used to be the whole world to my child. How did I become the extra person at the family dinner? And just like you, they don't know where to begin to reclaim their place. This message is for you, not to teach you how to parent, but to help you learn how to stand in your worth again, softly but with pride. If you've ever been hurt by your children's coldness, leave a 1. If you're afraid that one day you'll be forgotten, leave a 0. And if you'd like to stay connected with us, hit subscribe to receive our next message. Not every parent realizes this. A child's silence doesn't always start with ungratefulness. Sometimes it starts with your silence, your habit of enduring. You've gotten used to giving, used to stepping back, used to putting your feelings last. Your child grows and you step aside. They need something and you show up. They speak and you listen. They're angry and you go quiet. But no one ever told you that very pattern, if it goes on too long, can slowly wear away the respect between generations. Many parents have thought, if I just endure quietly, the family will stay peaceful. But the truth is, peace doesn't come from silence. It comes from balance. Because when one person always yields, the other unconsciously steps forward, then another step, and another, until the distance is no longer a gap. It becomes a fracture. Have you ever said it's okay when you were hurt, just to keep the peace, ever been spoken to harshly, but smiled and let it go? Ever been asked to help to babysit, to house sit, but didn't dare say no, afraid of upsetting anyone? Ever been forgotten for a visit, but chose not to bring it up? Maybe you thought that was your quiet way of loving, but to your children, over time, it no longer looks like love. It just becomes mom and dad always say yes. People, even your children, don't often value what comes too easily. Not because they're unkind, not because they're ungrateful, but because it's human nature. We all tend to forget the worth of what's always there, until one day it's gone. No one notices the light bulb that always turns on until it doesn't. No one cherishes the old blanket until they're cold and it's missing. No one truly sees the curved back until the day it no longer rises for them. And here's something subtle but vital. When you always say yes, you quietly teach others that your no holds no weight. When you keep nodding, even when you're tired, when you always say yes, even when you're tired, you make your future no feel like a problem. When you always show up, people stop recognizing the value in your presence. And when you always stay quiet, others start to believe they have the right to treat you that way forever. Many parents have quietly admitted, "I thought if I just endured, my child would eventually understand." But sometimes what you believe is love is seen by others as a weakness. What you call patience is mistaken for submission. What you think is selflessness becomes an expectation. And the tragedy is this: the most beautiful part of you becomes the part that hurts you the most. Look back, not to blame yourself, but to understand love was never meant to be one-sided. Caring should not cost you your voice. Sacrifice should not mean complete silence. Kindness should never be the mat people unknowingly step on every day. If you've ever asked, "Why doesn't my child respect me the way they used to?" the answer may not lie in their faults, but in the way you slowly remove the boundaries of your dignity, all in the name of love. You love your child. No one questions that. But sometimes that love, without limits, without balance, without reciprocity, becomes a burden for both sides. Your children, used to your endless giving, no longer think to ask, "How's mom today? Does dad need anything?" Not because they're unkind, but because you never taught them to ask. Love must be taught too. And the first step in teaching again is not scolding, not demanding, but rising from the quiet place you've been hiding in. You don't need to change others. You only need to change how you show up. Instead of trying to please, live in your truth. Instead of silence, speak at the right time. Instead of helping right away, pause and ask, "Do you think you can do this on your own this time?" Because strangely, when you stop being available every moment, people finally begin to appreciate your presence again. We won't blame the younger generation, but we will look inward with honesty, gentleness, without judgment, because you do not need to disappear to keep the family happy. And you certainly don't need to trade your self-respect to be called a good father or sweet mother. Love is not meant to be a long, silent burden of sacrifice and hope. It should be a space where both sides grow in understanding and mutual respect. There is a truth that many people only come to realize in old age, that most of their life was spent trying to keep others comfortable. You lived to raise your children right, lived to hold the family together, lived so your partner had someone to lean on, lived to fulfill the expectations placed upon you as a mother, a father, and a provider. But then there comes a moment when the children are grown, the house is quiet, no one needs you to carry anything anymore. And suddenly you find yourself lost in the emptiness left behind by all your sacrifices. You sit there, mornings with no one calling your name, meals with no one asking, "What would you like to eat today, Mom?" And one day you quietly ask yourself, "If I'm not a mother, a father, a helper, then who am I?" That question seems small, but it's a turning point. Because for the first time in decades, you are being invited to come home to yourself, not to please anyone, but to listen to that quiet voice inside, the one that's been silenced under a lifetime of shoulds, musts, and have-tos. Maybe you were once a lively woman who loved the color yellow, who kept a journal, who dreamed of learning to play the piano. Maybe you were once a man who enjoyed fixing old watches, who loved painting, who once dreamed of traveling to a distant land. But piece by piece, those parts of you were buried beneath layers of duty. And now, with no one left to demand anything of you, You find yourself standing in the middle of your life's room surrounded by things you never got to live. But from that place, you can choose again. You can realize you are never just a role in someone else's story. You are a whole person with thoughts, emotions, and the right to live a meaningful life, even if no one is counting on you anymore. You don't need to be useful all the time. You don't have to be strong to have all the answers to carry every burden. You were once the old tree holding up the forest, but now you have every right to sit in the shade and rest beneath your branches. The truth is, your worth isn't tied to how much others need you. It lies in this. Do you still believe you deserve a full, rich life, even if no one calls, even if no one honors you the way they used to? Something strange happens when you stop seeking your value from the outside. Your eyes begin to shine. Your voice grows steadier. Your steps become slower, but more grounded. Because the one who knows who they are doesn't need anyone's approval to feel worthy. A person like that doesn't get angry when they're overlooked. They don't beg to be heard. They simply smile and quietly walk away from where they no longer belong and leave behind an emptiness others will eventually feel for themselves. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to bring up the past. You don't need to recount your sacrifices. You just need to live as someone who knows silence can also be power, if it comes from clarity. Raymond, an old friend of mine, once tried shouting, hoping his children would respect him. But when he stopped arguing, stopped listing all that he had done for them, and simply lived with quiet strength, something strange happened. His children started to listen, because people don't respect you just because you ask for it. They respect you when you show them you no longer need their validation to feel complete. And that's something you can do, starting with a small act. Write a journal page, even if no one will read it. Buy a beautiful shirt simply because you like it, not because anyone will see it. Say no to a favor if you feel tired that day. Skip a gathering if the only reason you go is to play the good mother. Starting today, you can choose to live as someone who no longer begs for space in someone else's heart. Because you've entered the most beautiful stage of life, the stage where you finally know. You don't need to be extraordinary to be worthy of being heard. If you've ever felt that you're no longer needed, then you more than anyone understand this. Being needed is not where your self-worth comes from. It comes from one question: when no one needs you anymore, do you still know how to need yourself? And if you've read this far, maybe you're smiling now, even if your eyes are a little wet. Because deep down you know that a part of you, the part that had been forgotten, is starting to come alive again. There's something older people often don't do. Not because they don't know how, but because they've always been too kind. And that is setting boundaries. You once let your child call you at midnight for an urgent thing, and you answered even though your eyes were foggy from sleeping pills. You once canceled your own doctor's appointment because your child suddenly needed you to babysit. You once stayed silent while being blamed, even though inside you wanted to say, "I didn't deserve to be spoken to like that." You once smiled and brushed it off, even when the person in front of you had been disrespectful. You think to yourself, it's okay, as long as the family stays peaceful. But some forms of peace, if built on one-sided endurance, are no longer peace. They are silent injustice. Because when you don't speak up about what you won't accept, you're unintentionally telling others, "I accept everything." And others, even your children, may not intentionally cross the line. But when there are no clear boundaries, they begin to step forward, one foot then another, until one day you no longer recognize where you stand in the relationship. Here's something gentle, but powerful: boundaries are not walls. They are fences with gates, and you are the one holding the key. You can love your children deeply and still have the right to say, "The way you spoke to me just now, it hurt." You can want to help them and still have the right to say, "I already had something planned that day. I hope you can reschedule." You can miss your grandchild without agreeing to babysit 7 days a week. You can want closeness without endlessly bending yourself to maintain it. Setting boundaries is not rebellion. It's teaching others how to treat you. I once met a man named Edward. He wasn't loud. On the contrary, he was calm, quiet, and composed. But there's one moment I'll never forget: the way he taught his children, not through shouting, but through inner strength. One day at a family dinner, one of his children spoke to him in a disrespectful tone. No yelling, no cursing. Just that dismissive way of speaking that says you're old. What do you know? Edward didn't get angry. He didn't lash out. He didn't storm off to make a scene. He simply looked his child in the eye and calmly said, "I don't accept being spoken to like that. If you continue, I will leave the table." And he did exactly that. No tension, no broken relationships. Just one thing changed. From that moment on, he no longer allowed others to hurt him so easily. At first, his child was surprised, then a bit annoyed. But eventually, something shifted. I believe it's because when others see that you have standards, they begin to approach you with more care. It's like a beautiful home. It has doors. It has rules for entering. No one resents that. In fact, they respect it more because they understand not everyone gets to walk in. And being inside doesn't mean you get to do whatever you want. You see, there was a time when you opened your heart wide, thinking love should have no limits. You used to think it's okay, I'll just endure a little more, as long as the family stays together. But love without limits can easily become unintentional harm, and closeness without boundaries can easily become a thoughtless routine. Edward didn't teach his children with lectures. He taught them by the way he lived, gently with boundaries. And from that, his children began to relearn how to treat their father as someone who deserves respect. There may be people who won't understand you at first. They're used to the version of you that was always available, always agreeable, always enduring. And when you begin to change, they'll resist. But in time, they will learn if you remain steady. They will come to understand if you live in alignment with your truth. And most importantly, you will no longer be hurt by things that you no longer allow. Start small. Say no to something you don't want to do. Gently point it out when someone treats you unfairly. Get up and leave the table. If you feel you're no longer being respected, you don't have to change everything in a day. Just change one thing and hold it. Because once you know your boundaries, others will start to tread more gently when they come close. Then one day you realize you're not sad because of what someone did. You're sad because no one did anything at all. No one called, no one asked, no one needed you. And so you felt the ache. But deeper than that, sadness was something even scarier. You started to feel like your worth depended on your children's attention. If they texted you that day, your heart felt light. If a whole week passed without a call, you felt invisible. If they said something kind, you felt loved. But if they were short or harsh, you lost sleep, you overthought, and maybe even blamed yourself. Your emotions went up and down based on how someone else treated you, like a sail without an anchor. And the wind isn't always gentle, is it? This is something many parents don't notice. Loving your children is natural, but that love should not become the rope that ties your happiness down. You have the right to love your children deeply, but you also have a responsibility to protect the stability of your inner world. Because the moment you give someone else control over your emotions, you quietly place your life outside of your own hands. And when the person holding that string is your child, who is already overwhelmed by their own life, your happiness will always feel fragile. I once knew a woman named Linda. She lived each day waiting for a call. Every morning, the first thing she did was check her phone, not to see the time, but to hope for a message from her child. Each hour she glanced at the screen, not out of urgency, but out of longing. And every time there was nothing, she whispered to herself, "They're probably just busy." But I knew that probably busy didn't soothe the ache. It just made Linda better at hiding it, as she quietly turned away again. Over time, the waiting became a habit, and that habit kept her stuck in a cycle of longing, then disappointment, then hurt, until finally she began to feel like a burden. But one day, it wasn't her child who changed. It was Linda. She told me, "I don't want my days to be determined by whether or not someone calls me." So she started again, with very small things. A gentle dance class on Wednesday afternoons, even though she said her knees weren't what they used to be. Lunch with an old friend at a cafe just a few blocks from home. A half-finished book she picked up again after years. A new pair of walking shoes she bought for herself, just because she thought, "I deserve to walk in comfort too." And then something strange happened when Linda no longer revolved around her children's emotions. Her children began to revolve around her. They called more. They checked in sincerely. They were curious about her new life, a life they never noticed before, because the mother who used to only wait had become a woman with a life of her own, a light of her own, a sense of fullness that didn't come from anyone else. Do you know why? Because someone who has a life of their own has gravity. Because someone who knows joy without waiting on anyone makes others want to be near. Because someone who tends to their happiness will never become an emotional burden to others. You don't need to live loudly. You don't need to party like you're 20. Just have something that makes you look forward to the morning. A flower pot to water, a small meal you cook, simply because you like it. An old song that you smile softly. A cup of tea you make, not for anyone else, but because you too deserve care. You no longer sit and wait to be loved. You are becoming someone who knows how to care for herself the way you once cared for everyone else. And do you know what happens when you live that way? You feel less disappointed when someone cancels. You feel less hurt when a message goes unanswered. You feel less rejected when no one invites you to a family gathering. Not because you no longer hope, but because you no longer let that hope determine your worth. You are you, not someone who shines only when called and dims when forgotten. You are your light, whether someone comes near or not. And here's the strange thing. You don't need to shout. You don't need to explain. You don't need to beg. You don't need to prove anything to be respected again. The only thing you need to do is live as someone who has found herself. No longer doing things just to be noticed. No longer silently suffering just to keep the peace. No longer stumbling around trying to find your place in someone else's heart. You live slower now, clearer, and you no longer feel wrong just because someone else acts distant. And then little by little, the shift begins. Not with your child returning home with gifts in hand. Not with some big family reunion filled with mom or dad. No, it all happens quietly. A phone call. Not for something urgent, but just to say I wanted to hear your voice. A dinner invitation, not because they need you to babysit, but simply I wanted to eat with you today. A sentence that used to be brushed off, now heard completely. You're surprised, but you don't get too excited because you no longer tie your peace to moments like these. If they come, you receive them. If they don't, you still live in peace. Because the most valuable thing is this: you stood up and returned to your rightful place. And slowly you begin to see it in their eyes. A little respect, a little surprise, and maybe a little discomfort as they realize you're no longer the one who always puts up with everything. No need to blame. No need to say, see, just live, as if to say, I'm still here, but I will no longer accept being dismissed. Relationships aren't repaired through anger, nor by long emotional conversations. They're restored through the quiet strength of someone who no longer chases love, but simply shows up with quiet dignity. You don't need to become difficult. You only need to become less easy to hurt. James, a father who was once interrupted, mocked, dismissed, used to get angry, argue, and then give up. But when he stopped fighting and just lived with quiet, firm boundaries, his children started to listen. Not because he convinced them, but because he stopped trying. Respect doesn't come from pressure. It comes from the way you walk, even if no one walks beside you. And your children, they see it more clearly than anyone. They feel it. Mom and dad aren't waiting on us anymore, but they're still living, gentle but no longer passive, still loving but no longer weak. And in that way, love is restored, not through tears, but through the quiet presence of someone wise. You're no longer the one to call only when needed. You're becoming someone worth sitting beside, even when nothing is needed at all. It may take time, because people will need to adjust to this new version of you. They might test you, speak harshly, act the same old way, just to see if you've changed. Don't get angry. Don't tense up. Just remind them, gently, I still love you, but I no longer live to please others at all costs. And then you'll see something quietly happen. They begin to adjust. They begin to respect boundaries. They begin to listen more. They begin to look at you differently. You don't need your children to change so you can finally live in peace. You just need to choose peace first and let them change in their own time. There is a quiet moment in every parent's journey when you suddenly realize how far you've come, so far that you may not even recognize the version of you from years ago. You were the one who asked, "What do you want to eat today?" The one who stayed up all night over a child's cough. The one who saved the last dollar for school tuition. The one who set aside your dreams, just so someone else could rise. You lived with deep kindness, and in being so kind, you forgot that a whole life cannot be lived only for others. Today, if you are still alive, you are not here simply to exist. You are here to live in the fullness of what old age truly offers, an inner richness. You no longer need to prove anything. You no longer need to fight for a place in someone's heart. You don't need a phone call to feel your day is complete, because after everything, you are still here, and your presence is valuable whether anyone acknowledges it or not. Respect, where, as we've said, doesn't come from repeating your sacrifices. It comes from the way you show up each day, calm and steady as someone who no longer begs to be heard. You can choose to live quietly, but you don't need to shrink. You can choose to speak less, but when you do speak, let your voice carry the clarity of someone who knows herself. And here is what I want to leave you with. A small truth, a secret you may have forgotten. No one can make you feel small unless you agree to it. No one can make you feel invisible if you still see yourself. No one can steal your peace if you are firmly seated within yourself. Old age is not a waiting room. It's not the leftover chapter at the end of your story. It is the final stretch, but radiant like the sunset over a quiet lake, still beautiful and deep. You've lived a life full of caring for others. Now please begin to care for yourself completely and unapologetically. And if you wish to keep hearing whispers like this, please hit subscribe. I would be deeply grateful. You are never too old to live differently, never too late to step fully into your own life as someone who knows exactly who they are and who has always been. Worthy of love, worthy of being heard, worthy of respect. Starting today, please live as if you don't need anyone's approval to know you are worthy. You don't need anyone to say your name to know your life still holds meaning. You live because you are you, and that in itself is enough. Thank you for staying until the very end. May these words stay with you just long enough so that one day you stop living to be seen by others and begin living because you finally see yourself. See you in the next video.